at each position, going 10 to 15 deep at each position. So, those have been going up on VikingUpdate.com and will be. But one thing that I found, with the Vikings' two biggest free agents being Sheldon Richardson and Anthony Barr, I kind of have to take a look at it because I kind of waver back and forth between which one is more important for the Vikings to re-sign and, before free agency gets here. And for me, I think it's very close because we know the importance of the three technique that Sheldon Richardson played. And I don't think there is a replacement that is currently on the roster for him. Tom Johnson is also a free agent. If they re-sign him, I think he and another guy could kind of replace what Sheldon Richardson gave them. But I do think that the defensive tackle market is not very strong in free agency. There are guys like Grady Jarrett who I think if he doesn't get re-signed before free agency will get the franchise tag. Ndamukong Suh is going to be too expensive. And some of the other top guys, all have their issues, either restricted free agency or, a guy like David Irving in Dallas who's, reportedly failed multiple drug tests and just isn't a guy that you can really trust. It just seems to me like a lot of the defensive tackles in free agency have issues that should concern any team that signs them. And therefore, looking at what's available at linebacker to replace Anthony Barr versus defensive tackle to replace Sheldon Richardson, I think if I were in the Viking shoes, I would probably look to re-sign Sheldon Richardson, and you can probably get him cheaper for what Anthony Barr thinks he's worth.
Interesting because I feel like the speculation right after the season was, okay, they probably let Sheldon Richardson go, but it looks like it's just developing. Maybe he's more valuable than we thought, given the market.
Yeah, and, people look at it, and I think he had something like 4 sacks, which isn't great. But, defensive tackles generally aren't, the double-digit type guys. Guys like Ndamukong Suh, Aaron Donald are the exception to that. But, I think Richardson had a decent season, not a great season. I think he could have helped himself a lot more in free agency, if he would have been able to get after the quarterback a little bit more. But, there just aren't a lot of good pass rushers from that 3 technique that are available in free agency. Sue is one, Grady Jarrett's another, but I just don't see those being realistic for the Vikings. And then you get in, Brandon Mebane from the Chargers. He's 34 years old. Danny Shelton, nice 25-year-old, but not really a full-time guy, and he's mostly a run stuffer. The guy that I kind of like that I would be interested to see if the Vikings take a run at, Darius Philon, who's with the Chargers as well. He had 4 sacks and 17 hurries. I saw a few of the games that the Chargers played, and when he's in there, he really stuck out as a guy who's really disruptive. So, if there is one guy that really intrigues me in free agency at that position, it's Darius Philon.
Interesting. Let's get into the Anthony Barr scenarios. Let's thank Tony Hoaglund, Hoaglund, your State Farm agent in Champlin. He handles my insurance. He handles Michael Russo's insurance. And even though he has his office in Champlin, a very nice place, we've been there and done shows there before. You can work with him via app, via email, via phone, very responsive staff. Highly recommend working with Tony. He's also providing financial services these days.
Hey, Minnesota sports fans. This is your local State Farm agent, Tony Hoaglund. I need you all to ask yourselves this question. If you're in an at-fault car accident and you are sued for $700,000, how much of that $700,000 will my current insurance company pay? If you are unsure or can't answer all $700,000, you need to give us a call. State Farm has been number 1 in car insurance since World War II and number 1 in homeowners insurance since 1964. For a no-obligation review of your current policies, call us at 763-421-4900 or check out our website at www.champlininsurance.com.
All right, so any new perspectives on Anthony Barr and what's ahead for him?
Well, I do think that the Vikings would like to re-sign him, but I get the impression that he is looking for a lot more money than they are willing to spend. And, when I look at what the Vikings were facing last offseason, where they re-signed Danielle Hunter, they re-signed Eric Kendricks, they re-signed Stephon Diggs, or I should say give extensions to all those guys. I think that Barr is probably looking for more than Kendrick Scott, which is averaging $10 million over 4 years. So I think that when I look at the times last year when the Vikings were missing Eric Kendricks because of injury, and when they were missing Anthony Barr because of injury, I felt like when Kendricks was out, it was far more of an impact on that defense than when Barr was out. I think Eric Wilson subbed in nicely for Barr. I don't know that he's necessarily ready for a full-time job there, but I feel like Barr is maybe overestimating his value a little bit. And that's not to say he doesn't deserve a big contract, but there are so many decent outside linebackers available in free agency. And I just don't know how he's going to stack up because, Jadeveon Clowney and Dee Ford are going to get huge money, a lot of it because of what they can do rushing the passer. Anthony Barr is considered a very good pass rusher, but he really wasn't used that much in that role last year. When you look at things like Pro Football Focus and how often somebody is rushing the passer, he's fairly far down there. And so in my mind, if he's going to get a huge contract in the, $13 to $15 million a year range, it's going to have to probably come from a 3-4 defensive team where he's an outside linebacker who's used mainly to rush the passer and give him more opportunities. And even then, it's going to take a little bit of a leap of faith by that team to say, okay, we know you didn't have a ton of sacks when you were in Minnesota, but we think you can if we have you rushing the passer more often.
Yeah, and that's the thing. His pass rushing statistics were not very good last season. I don't know if I had this conversation with you or was it Viking people, but I just remember having a couple of conversations last summer saying, hey, he's got to prove that he can beat a tackle when he rushes the passer. He needs to prove that he can not just the kind of blitz where the C opens and he can just run right at the quarterback, but he's got to beat a tackle to prove his value. And he really didn't prove he can do that.
Yeah, and they worked with him all last offseason and through shorter segments of practice last year during the season where he would go with the defensive linemen and work on that, where they were going one-on-ones against offensive tackles. And, I think he learned a decent amount, but I don't necessarily know that he was able to apply that in game situations enough to make it natural for him. And so I think the Vikings recognized that, and they had him working with Andre Patterson, the defensive line coach, on, using his hands better and all those sorts of things. But, the fact of the matter is he didn't get to the quarterback all that often. And so I feel like, first of all, I don't think he's worth putting the franchise tag on, and that might just irritate him more than anything. And secondly, I feel like he may end up going into free agency and realizing during that 3-day negotiating period in March that, maybe his value isn't as much as he thought. Now, maybe he and his agent know something about other teams that may be interested in him, but with the options that are out there in free agency, or at least scheduled to be out there in free agency, it's going to be a fairly crowded outside linebacker market. And so I just don't know that he's going to get the huge bucks when people are looking for value.
Let's talk about running backs next. Thanks to John Hedges and Fixology Repair, fixologyrepair.com, third floor Mall of America by Nordstrom's in downtown Minneapolis in the Skyway, right across from Dunn Brothers and Taco John's.
There are some things in life that you just can't live without. Now, whether it's a special piece of jewelry, a watch, or even your smartphone, you want it in working condition. At Fixology Repair, we are committed to restoring your pieces so that everything works or fits the way it ought to. Watch servicing, chain repair, and broken screen replacements are just a few of the services that we offer at our 2 locations, Mall of America and the Skyway in downtown Minneapolis. Please visit us at fixologyrepair.com or at fixologymn on Twitter to learn more. Mention this ad and get a 10% discount on our services.
All right, running back. Latavius Murray, where do you think he stands?
Well, I think he would welcome the opportunity to come back and compete with Dalvin Cook. But, if Dalvin Cook is healthy, I don't see the Vikings going with a 50-50 split there. I think that Cook gets the majority, then Latavius Murray gets, I don't want to say leftovers, but I don't think he gets much more than 30% of the snaps there. So I see him as a guy that probably would look to go into free agency and see what else is there for him. And he kind of fits in the mold with some of the most intriguing value running backs out there in free agency. I mean, Le'Veon Bell's going to get a big contract if people trust that he is, number one, in shape, and number two, engaged and willing to really put the work in. Mark Ingram is also a free agent, and he should get a lot of run in free agency. After that, there are a bunch of older guys: Adrian Peterson, Marshawn Lynch, Doug Martin, Frank Gore, LeGarrette Blount, all those guys that are basically 32 or older and probably have a lot of tread on them. So the guys that I think Murray is going to be competing against will be players like Tevin Coleman of the Falcons, who's more of a starter probably than Murray is. C.J. Anderson, who really kind of broke out once the Rams had their issues at running back, and then Jay Ajayi, who he was injured last year, but had a really good year with the Eagles before that. So I think Murray could find some interest, maybe in that $3 million a year range. But it'll just be interesting. He's not afraid to move around, but I think eventually he would like to just kind of find a team, find a role, and be able to compete for a starting job.
Absolutely. Let's talk about the kickers now. And by the way, we also have a sponsor of the basketball show, John Krasinski, SodaStick.com, that does a lot of football-themed apparel, whether it's Vikings or Gophers or Randy Moss stuff or moments of the past. They do a lot of special runs with featuring John Randall. Check out SodaStick.com as well as the sponsors of this show. What do you think they do with the kicker?
Well, if I'm them, I would look into Robbie Gould, who is a free agent. He has gone on Chicago radio and talked about how much he enjoyed his time in Chicago. And obviously, with Cody Parkey having his issues last year, I think every Bears fan would love to have Robbie Gould back. And, so Gould said a lot of good things about Chicago and maybe he could return there. He also said he wants, to be with a Super Bowl contender. Chicago, obviously, I think is in that conversation. But you also wonder if the Vikings may have a little bit of an advantage if they were interested in him because they play indoors. And I think as a kicker gets older, that has to be very appealing. But Gould has had such great success in two of the harder places to kick, Chicago and San Francisco. So maybe he's not really intimidated by continuing to play for an outdoor team or a team that has turf issues or weather issues late in the season. So I wouldn't really have a problem if the Vikings went back to Dan Bailey and just tried to get him a little bit more consistent, maybe getting a year further removed from the injury that he had in Dallas helps him out. Maybe, having a new special teams coordinator and Marwan Malouf helps. I don't know, but I just think there are a lot of options out there. The Vikings don't have to break the bank for a kicker, but if Gould's available, the price could be steep, but the price could be worth it given all the troubles the Vikings have had at that position.
Absolutely. Let's wrap up the show with just a quick preview of some of the mock drafts. We'll be getting much deeper into draft stuff as the draft approaches, but it's still February. We'll just do something brief now, just kind of update you on what people are thinking around the league. And again, if you'd like to advertise with this program, one of the two most popular across the podcast network, you can reach us at talknorthpodcast@gmail.com. What are the mock drafts saying at this moment?
Well, you'll be shocked to know that most of them have the Vikings going at an offensive line, which is just so natural. It's unbelievable. But I wrote a quick update on 11 different mock drafts from some of the national guys from CBS Sports, NFL.com, ESPN, and all but two of them had the Vikings going on the offensive line. The other two had them going defensive line. But it's basically the difference between one to another just depends on how many offensive linemen that writer, that analyst believes are going to be taken before the Vikings pick at 18. So most of them are looking at tackles or tackles that maybe project to guard, which makes a lot of sense for the Vikings. So it's